The fluorescent light in interrogation room B hummed with a sound that usually drove suspects to the brink of insanity, a low-frequency buzz that burrowed into the skull like a parasite. But Julian Thorne didn't seem to hear it. He sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the cold, scarred metal table, looking less like a man accused of a triple homicide and more like a tenure-track professor waiting for a slightly inconvenient faculty meeting to begin. Detective Marcus Miller wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, despite the room being kept intentionally freezing. He was exhausted. For 6 hours, he had thrown everything at Thorne. He had shown him the photos of the 3 girls, bright, hopeful chemistry students at Boston University, now lying in the morgue with their veins full of a toxin the lab boys still couldn't identify. He had screamed, he had whispered, he had slammed his fist on the table until his knuckles bruised, and Julian Thorne had simply blinked, adjusted his rimless glasses, and politely explained his whereabouts for every single minute of the last 3 days. "Detective," Julian said, his voice smooth, like expensive bourbon poured over ice, "I understand your frustration. Truly I do. These tragic deaths, they affect us all. But, as I have stated, I was at the symposium in Cambridge. There are 300 witnesses. The hotel security cameras captured my entry and exit. Unless I have developed the ability to bilocate, I simply could not have been near the laboratory when the ventilation system was tampered with." Miller stared at him. He knew, in his gut, in that primal place where cops store 20 years of street instinct, he knew Julian was the monster. The guy was too clean, too rehearsed. Normal, innocent people get angry, they get scared, they cry, they ask for lawyers immediately. Julian had waived his right to an attorney with a smile that suggested he found the legal system quaint. "We are done here," Miller said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Julian raised an eyebrow. "Am I free to go? The district attorney won't sign off on the charges without physical evidence or a confession. You have an alibi tighter than a bank vault. So yeah, you're free to go." Miller stood up, the chair scraping violently against the floor. "But don't leave town, Professor." Julian stood up, smoothing out the non-existent wrinkles on his charcoal wool suit. "I have classes to teach on Monday, Detective. I'm not going anywhere. Thank you for the coffee, although it was a bit acidic." Julian Thorne walked out of the interrogation room, not with the hurry of a man escaping a cage, but with the leisurely stride of a man who owns the zoo. He walked through the bullpen of the Boston precinct, ignoring the glares of a dozen officers who had spent the week hunting for the campus poisoner. Outside, the Boston autumn was in full swing. The wind was biting, whipping dead leaves specifically around the ankles of pedestrians, carrying the scent of approaching winter and exhaust fumes. Julian pushed through the heavy glass doors of the precinct, taking a deep breath of the cold air. He felt a rush of endorphins, not from relief, but from superiority. It was a game. It had always been a game, and he was winning because he was the only one who understood the rules. He reached for the brass handle of the revolving door, just as someone else was pushing in from the outside. It was a brief, awkward moment of friction. The door jammed for a split second. The man entering was tall, wearing a trench coat that had seen better days, his hair slightly disheveled by the wind. He carried a leather satchel that looked heavy with books. This was Dr. Arthur Vance. They stood face to face through the glass for a heartbeat, then the door rotated. They met in the small wedge of open space on the precinct steps. "Pardon me," Julian said, flashing his practiced, charming smile, the one that made students sign up for his advanced organic chemistry seminars in droves. He extended a hand to hold the door open for the stranger. Arthur Vance stopped. He didn't just look at Julian, he scanned him. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. 1. Arthur's eyes locked on 2. Julian's face. 2. Arthur's gaze dropped to the hand holding the door. then flicked back to the eyes. 3. Arthur inhaled sharply, a look of genuine confusion crossing his face, which instantly hardened into a mask of terrifying realization. "Thank you," Arthur said softly. His voice was low, resonant. "My pleasure," Julian replied, stepping out onto the sidewalk, buttoning his coat, feeling the thrill of freedom coursing through his veins. He walked away, blending into the crowd of commuters, a wolf successfully dressed in tweed. Arthur Vance stood frozen on the steps. He didn't enter the station immediately. He turned, watching Julian's retreating figure disappear into the grey afternoon. Arthur's heart rate had spiked. He felt a physical wave of nausea, the kind that hits you when you realize you've just brushed against something lethal. He pushed through the doors, moving with a sudden violent urgency. He didn't walk, he stormed. He bypassed the front desk sergeant, who was about to ask for ID, flashing a consultant badge that hung from a lanyard in his pocket. He kicked open the swinging gate to the detective's bullpen. "Miller." Arthur's voice boomed across the room, silencing the ringing phones and the chatter of typing. Detective Miller was slumped at his desk, head in his hands. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Arthur, I thought you weren't coming in until tomorrow. Look, I'm not in the mood for the Sherlock routine today. We just had to cut the prime suspect loose." "I know," Arthur said, marching up to Miller's desk. He didn't sit down. He stood over the detective, vibrating with intensity. "I just passed him at the door. Charcoal suit, rimless glasses, smells like expensive soap and arrogance. Julian Thorne. Yeah, that's him. We had nothing, Arthur, nothing. His alibi is solid gold. Get him back," Arthur ordered. "Now, before he gets on the subway." Miller laughed, a dry, humorless bark. "On what grounds? The Mentalist's got a bad vibe. The DA will have my badge, Arthur. We need evidence. We need a witness. We need a weapon. We have zero." Arthur leaned down, placing both hands on Miller's desk, leaning into the detective's personal space. His eyes were intense, burning with a manic intelligence. "I don't have a vibe, Marcus. I have a diagnosis. In the 3 seconds we shared a doorway, that man confessed to me. He just didn't use words." Miller sighed, rubbing his temples. "Okay, humor me. What did you see that an entire team of detectives and 6 hours of interrogation missed?" Arthur straightened up, turning to look at the whiteboard covered in crime scene photos. He began to pace, his hands moving as he spoke, dissecting the moment that had just occurred. "First, the physiology," Arthur began, holding up one finger. "It's 45 degrees outside. The wind chill makes it feel like 30. He just came out of a high-stress interrogation where you undoubtedly turned up the heat, metaphorically, if not literally. When a human being is under the biological stress of lying to authorities for hours, the sympathetic nervous system triggers the fight-or-flight response. Blood is diverted from the extremities to the major muscle groups. Hands get cold, clammy, sweaty." Arthur turned to Miller. "I brushed his hand when he held the door. It wasn't cold, it wasn't clammy, it was warm, and it was bone dry. So he has good circulation," Miller scoffed. "That's not a crime, it's a symptom, Marcus," Arthur snapped. "It means his autonomic nervous system didn't react to the stress. He wasn't suppressing fear during your interrogation. He wasn't anxious about being caught. He was completely physiologically dissociated from the consequences. That level of calm isn't discipline, it's pathology. It's the somatic signature of a psychopath who believes he is a superior species." Arthur held up a second finger. "Second, the blink rate. Did you notice how often he blinks?" Miller shrugged. "I don't know. Normal? Normal is 15 to 20 times a minute. Under stress it usually doubles. Liars blink rapidly as their brain processes the fabrication. But Julian? In the 3 seconds I looked at him, he didn't blink once. Not once. He held a fixed gaze. It's called The reptilian stare. It happens when a predator is focused entirely on the prey, or in his case, focused entirely on maintaining the mask. He was suppressing the blink reflex consciously because he knows about body language. He overcompensated. He's trying too hard to look honest, which makes him look artificial. Arthur paused, looking round the room. The other detectives had stopped working. They were listening. This was the part where the magic happened, where Arthur Vance pulled the invisible threads of the universe and wove them into a noose. But those are just indicators, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The smoking gun was the nose. The nose? Miller asked, incredulous. The bunny nose, Arthur clarified. It's a micro-expression, a tiny, involuntary wrinkling of the nose muscle, the levator labii superioris, alac nasi. It happens when we smell something disgusting or when a smell triggers a visceral, negative memory. Arthur pointed to the coffee pot steaming in the corner of the bullpen. Your coffee, it's burning. It's been on the burner too long. It smells like charred beans and bitterness. As Julian passed the threshold, the wind blew that smell right into his face. For a split second, his mask slipped, his nose wrinkled. Not in annoyance, Marcus. In recognition. Miller looked at the coffee pot, then back at Arthur. So he doesn't like bad coffee. Join the club. No, Arthur said, his eyes widening. Think about the poison. You said the lab couldn't identify it yet. But most organic poisons, cyanide, arsenic, strychnine, they have distinct profiles. But there are synthetic alkaloids, rare ones, used in high-level organic chemistry. Arthur grabbed a marker and wrote on the whiteboard, nitrobenzene. Nitrobenzene, Arthur said, used in industrial solvents, highly toxic. And do you know what it smells like? Miller shook his head. It smells like bitter almonds, Arthur said, or to the untrained nose, like burnt roasted coffee. The room went silent. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to get louder. He smelled the burnt coffee, Arthur continued, speaking faster now, the pieces clicking into place. And his brain didn't register coffee. It registered murder weapon. It was a sensory flashback. He wrinkled his nose because the scent took him back to the moment he mixed the solution. He didn't react to the police radio. He didn't react to your badge. He reacted to the smell of his own sin. Miller stood up slowly. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. You think he synthesized it himself? He's a professor of organic chemistry, Arthur said. He has access to the precursors. He has the knowledge. And he has the arrogance to think he could create a compound that would degrade before your lab boys could find it. That's why he's so calm. He knows the poison is gone from their systems by now. He thinks he committed the perfect crime. Arthur walked to the window, looking out at the street where Julian had vanished. But he forgot that the body keeps the score. His biology betrayed him in the doorway. He's guilty, Marcus. And if we don't catch him tonight, he's going to realize that the smell of the coffee might have given him away. He's going to go back to clean up whatever loose ends he left behind. Miller grabbed his coat. If he's going to clean up, he needs to go to the source, the lab. Exactly, Arthur said. But we can't just arrest him. We need him to confess. We need to break that dissociation. We need to make him feel fear. How do we do that? Miller asked, checking his service weapon. Arthur turned, a dark, predatory smile playing on his lips. It was the smile of a mentalist who was about to perform his greatest trick. We don't use evidence. We use his own ego against him. We lie to him, Marcus. We lie better than he does. This is the moment where you realize that the world isn't what it seems. We walk past monsters every day, in the grocery store, on the subway, holding the door for us at the bank. They look like us. They smile like us. But there are signs, tiny microscopic glitches in their human suit that reveal the darkness underneath. if you want to learn how to see the truth hidden in plain sight. And if you're enjoying this dive into the criminal mind, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps us bring these stories to light. We analyze the behaviors that predators don't want you to know about. Join our community. Now let's go back to Boston, where the hunt is about to turn psychological. Arthur and Miller sat in the unmarked police cruiser, watching the entrance to the university's science center. The sun had set, and the campus was bathed in the orange glow of sodium streetlights. The wind was howling now, stripping the last leaves from the oaks. "He won't come if he sees the car," Miller said, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. "He won't see the car," Arthur replied, his eyes closed, visualizing the layout of the building. "He's not looking for police anymore. He's looking for flaws in his own work." The smell of the coffee spooked him, even if he doesn't consciously realize it yet. His subconscious is screaming at him that he might have left a trace. "Tell me about the victims," Arthur said suddenly, opening his eyes. "I need to know them, not as corpses, as people." Miller pulled a file folder from the dashboard. Sarah Jenkins, 20. Emily Chun, 21. Jessica Moore, 20. All top of their class. All vying for the same research grant. The Thorne Fellowship. The Thorne Fellowship, Arthur repeated. "Named after a suspect?" "Yeah, it's prestigious. Full ride to a PhD program. Guaranteed job placement. Thorne picks one winner every year. This year the competition was brutal, so he kills the top 3 contenders," Arthur mused. "Why? Did they find out something? Or did they fail him in some way?" "We dug into their emails," Miller said. "Nothing suspicious. Just stress about grades, studying late, ... Wait." Miller flipped a page. Jessica Moore sent an email to her mother 2 days before she died. She said, "Professor Thorne is helping me with my private project. He's so intense, but I think I'm going to win. I just have to do what he asks." "Private project," Arthur whispered. Whatever he was having them do, it wasn't on the syllabus. He was using them, maybe testing something on them, or having them synthesize something illegal. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the darkness near the rear entrance of the science center. It was a figure in a dark coat, moving with purpose. "There," Arthur pointed. "He's using the service entrance. He still has his keycard." Miller reached for the door handle. "Let's grab him." "No," Arthur stopped him, a hand on Miller's arm. "If we grab him now, he claims he's just working late. We need to catch him in the act of destroying evidence. Or better yet, we need him to tell us how he did it." They watched as Julian Thorne slipped into the building. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind him. "Give him 5 minutes," Arthur said, checking his watch. "Let him get comfortable. Let him think he's safe. Then we go in. But Marcus, let me do the talking. I need to wind him up. I need to attack his intellect." Inside the laboratory, the air was sterile and cold. The hum of the fume hood was the only sound. Julian Thorne moved through the shadows, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. He wasn't panicked, but he was annoyed. That encounter at the police station, the man with the intense eyes, it had unsettled him. Why had he smelled the coffee so strongly? He reached his personal lab bench at the back of the room. It was locked with a biometric scanner. He pressed his thumb against it, and the drawer hissed open. Inside, nestled in foam, were several vials of clear liquid. He picked one up, holding it to the light. It was perfect, elegant, a derivative of nitrobenzene, but modified to break down rapidly when exposed to human body temperature over 99 degrees. It mimicked cardiac arrest perfectly. The girls hadn't suffered ... much. They had simply been necessary sacrifices. They were getting too close to the truth of his research, that he was synthesizing illegal nootropics for sale on the dark web. They thought they were making a new cognitive enhancer for Alzheimer's. When they realized what it really was, they had to be removed. Such a waste of potential, Julien whispered to the vial. But science requires sacrifice. He walked over to the industrial sink, preparing to pour the contents down the drain and flush it with bleach. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Professor. The voice came from the darkness behind him. Julien spun around, hiding the vial behind his back in a smooth, practiced motion. Arthur Vance stood in the doorway of the lab, hands in his pockets, looking completely at ease. Detective Miller was nowhere to be seen. He was circling round to cut off the exit. "Who are you?" Julien demanded, his voice steady, though his pulse jumped. "This is a restricted area. I'll call campus security." "You could," Arthur said, walking slowly into the room, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum. "But then you'd have to explain why you're here at midnight, holding a vial of, what is that, modified nitrobenzene? Or did you tweak the carbon chain to make it undetectable?" Julian's eyes narrowed. He recognized the man from the door. "You, the man who can't navigate a revolving door, and you're the man whose hand was warm when it should have been cold." Arthur countered. "I am Dr. Vance. I consult for the police on cases that require a specialized perspective." "A psychic," Julian sneered. "Please, I'm a man of science. I don't believe in parlor tricks." "Oh, I'm not a psychic, Julian. I'm a reader of behavior. And right now, your behavior is screaming." Arthur stopped 10 feet away, leaning against a lab table. "We know about the girls. We know about the private project, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I'm confused." "Confused?" Julian asked, his grip on the vial tightening. "Yes. See, the autopsy results just came back for Sarah Jenkins. The second round. They found something the first round missed." Arthur was lying. He was lying with the confidence of a sociopath. This was the gamble. "They found traces of the poison in the hair follicles." Arthur lied. "But here's the thing. The chemical signature suggests that poison was heated before it was administered. Why would you heat it, unless you didn't know what you were doing?" Arthur let the insult hang in the air. He attacked Julian's greatest weakness, his intellectual vanity. "Didn't know what I was doing." Julian laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "That's absurd. Any competent chemist knows that heating a volatile compound like that would destabilize the molecular bonds. It would render it inert." "Well," Arthur shrugged, looking bored, "that's what the report says. Clumsy chemistry. Amateur hour. Maybe you're not the genius everyone says you are. Maybe you just got lucky." Julian's face flushed. The vein in his temple throbbed. He took a step forward, the vial forgotten in his hand, visible now. "Luck has nothing to do with it," Julian hissed. "It is precision. It is art. If they found traces, it's because their equipment is contaminated, not because my method was flawed. The compound is designed to be administered at room temperature. If it were heated, it would smell. It would smell like ... He stopped. Arthur smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Like burnt coffee, like bitter almonds." Julian froze. He realized the trap. He had just confirmed knowledge of the poison's properties that were not public record. "You just told us the compound shouldn't be heated," Arthur said softly. "And you confirmed the smell." "Only the killer would know that, Julian, because only the killer synthesized it." Julian looked at the vial in his hand. Then he looked at Arthur. The mask of the civilized professor fell away completely. His face contorted into a snarl of pure, animalistic rage. "You think you're clever," Julian whispered, uncorking the vial with his thumb. "But you're just a distraction." "Don't," Arthur warned, his voice dropping an octave. "It's volatile," Julian said, raising the vial. "One splash in your face, Dr. Vance, and you won't be reading anyone's micro-expressions ever again. You'll be clawing your eyes out while your nervous system shuts down." Julian lunged. The distance between them was 10 feet. Julian covered it with the terrifying speed of a cornered animal, his arm cocked back to throw the lethal liquid. Arthur didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He watched the mechanics of Julian's throw, The shift of weight to the front foot, the rotation of the shoulder, the tightening of the triceps. In that fraction of a second, Arthur calculated the trajectory. Just as Julian's arm snapped forward, a gunshot shattered the silence of the lab. Bang! The glass vial in Julian's hand exploded into 1,000 glittering shards. The liquid sprayed harmlessly sideways, coating a nearby centrifuge instead of Arthur's face. Julian screamed, clutching his hand, which was cut by the glass but miraculously intact from the bullet. Detective Miller stood in the doorway of the prep room, his service weapon smoking, his aim impeccable. "Drop it, or the next one goes in your knee." Julian fell to his knees, staring at the clear liquid dripping from the table, sizzling slightly as it reacted with the surface. The smell of bitter almonds and burnt coffee instantly filled the room, thick and suffocating. "It's over, Julian," Arthur said, his voice calm, cutting through the ringing in everyone's ears. He walked over to the professor, who was now trembling, not from cold, but from the adrenaline crash of failure. "You see? Now your hands are shaking. Now you're blinking. Now you're human again." Miller rushed forward, cuffing Julian's hands behind his back. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for the murders of Sarah Jenkins, Emily Chun, and Jessica Moore. You have the right to remain silent. ... As Miller recited the Miranda rights, Julian looked up at Arthur. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a look of profound confusion. "How?" Julian whispered. "How did you know I would come back here tonight?" Arthur crouched down, bringing his face level with Julian's. "Because you're a perfectionist, Julian, and perfectionists can't stand the idea of a loose end. When I mentioned the smell at the station, I planted a seed of doubt. I knew you'd come to check your stock, to make sure nothing was leaking, to destroy the evidence just in case. You didn't come back because you were guilty. You came back because you were insecure." Arthur stood up, adjusting his coat. "And that's the tragedy of men like you. You think you're gods, but you're slaves to your own egos." 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. The trial of the campus poisoner had become a media sensation. Julian Thorne sat at the defense table, looking diminished. The expensive suits didn't fit as well anymore. He had lost weight. The prison haircut didn't suit him, but his eyes were still sharp, scanning the jury, looking for weakness. Arthur Vance sat in the back row of the gallery. He wasn't testifying today. He had done his part during the pre-trial hearings, explaining the behavioral science that led to the arrest. Today was the closing argument. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Reynolds, was pacing in front of the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "the defense wants you to believe that the chemical found in the defendant's lab was for research. They want you to believe that the traces found in the victims were coincidental. But we have the testimony of Detective Miller. We have the chemical match. And most importantly, we have the defendant's own words." She played the recording from the lab, captured on Miller's body cam. Julian's voice, arrogant and condescending. "If it were heated, it would smell. It would smell like ... Double quotes he knew, Reynolds said, leaning on the railing. He knew the smell because he was there. He watched those young women die, and he felt nothing. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up. He didn't look at Julian. "We find the defendant, Julian Thorne, guilty on 3 counts of murder in the 1st degree." Julian didn't react. He didn't blink. He simply stared straight ahead at the judge, his face a mask of stone. As the bailiffs moved to take him away, Julian turned his head. He looked past the weeping families of the victims, past the reporters, straight to the back of the room. He locked eyes with Arthur. For a moment, the mask slipped again. Julian offered a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledgement, from one predator to another. Arthur didn't nod back. He just watched. Outside the courthouse, the press was a swarm. Microphones were shoved in faces, cameras flashed like lightning. Arthur slipped out a side exit, avoiding the circus. He walked down the street, the winter wind biting at his face. He found a small coffee shop on a corner, a quiet place with steamed windows. He went inside, ordering a black coffee. The smell hit him, rich, dark, roasted. He sat by the window, watching the city move. People rushing to work, to lovers, to secret meetings. He watched a couple arguing silently at a bus stop, the woman's crossed arms, the man's pleading palms. He watched a businessman checking his watch, every 10 seconds anxiety, lateness or something worse. He couldn't turn it off, the seeing, the knowing. Detective Miller walked in 5 minutes later. He looked lighter, younger. The weight of the case was off his shoulders. "I figured I'd find you here," Miller said, sitting down opposite Arthur. "You missed the press conference. The chief gave you a shout-out." "I don't do it for the shout-outs, Marcus," Arthur said, blowing on his coffee. "I know," Miller said. "You do it because you can't help it. So, what's next? You going back to your lectures? Writing another book?" Arthur looked out the window. "I don't know. There's always another puzzle, always another liar." "Well," Miller grinned, "if you ever get bored of academia, you know where to find us. We could use a permanent mentalist on the payroll." Arthur smiled, a genuine, rare smile. "I'll keep it in mind. But Marcus, do me a favor. Name it. Change the coffee brand at the precinct. Seriously, it smells like murder." Miller laughed, a loud, hearty sound that drew looks from the other patrons. "Deal?" As Arthur walked home that evening, the city felt different. The shadows seemed a little less deep. Justice had been served, not by a gun or a gavel, but by observation, by paying attention. He passed a park bench where an old man was feeding pigeons. The man looked lonely, his shoulders slumped. Arthur paused. He saw the tremor in the man's hands. Parkinson's or grief. He saw the wedding ring, loose on the finger widder. Arthur walked over and sat down on the other end of the bench. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there, sharing the silence. "They like the sesame seeds best," the old man said, his voice cracking. "I can see that," Arthur replied softly. "My wife, she used to bring the sesame bagels, leftovers from breakfast." "She sounds like a kind woman," Arthur said. The old man looked at him, tears welling in his eyes. "How did you know?" "I can see it in you," Arthur said. "You're still taking care of them for her." The old man smiled through his tears. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated human connection. No lies, no masks, just truth. And in that moment, Arthur Vance realized something profound. His gift wasn't just for hunting monsters. It was for healing the people the monsters left behind. It was for seeing the pain that people carried and acknowledging it. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a mentalist can do isn't to catch a killer. It's to tell a stranger, "I see you, I hear you, and you are not alone." If this story moved you as much as we hope it did, leave a comment below telling us which moment marked your life the most. Subscribe to the channel to follow stories that touch the heart and transform perspectives. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to understand that in life, not everything is what it seems.